Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well on this marvellous, marvellous Monday. That's it, baby. It's Monday. We're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes. You are looking amazing, by the way. I hope you had a fantastic Mother's Day yesterday, if indeed you was celebrating it. But anyway, like I say, we're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes because we've got something to cover. Because obviously we've recently had the affidavit of Sahara, regarding the phone situation around Bryan Kohberger, the crime over at 1122 King Road. And I've noticed a bit of a rebuttal of sorts from certain people, mainly the guilters, obviously. And what they're basically turning around and saying is, look, there is a 7-day kind of cooling off period or a window of opportunity when it comes to this phone data and providing the advanced timing reports. Now, what people are failing to understand with that is with respect of, yes, they didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was, or they want you to believe they didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was within that 7-day period. So that 7-day period would be relevant if you were specifically looking for one specific individual in that 7-day window, wouldn't it? Are you with me so far? So if you're thinking, right, we need to grab advanced timing reports for just one person, but you don't know who that person is, then of course you can't do it. But that's not what happened in the Idaho 4 case, is it? It's not what happened at all. So the fact that they didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was in that first 7 days becomes null and void, because this wasn't about searching for one specific phone. This was about searching for an abundance of phones, all of the phones, a dragnet of sorts. When you go in and you pull the information from everyone in an area for a specific period of time, and they would have done that incredibly, incredibly quick. Let's get into Siray's. Tonight we're going to go live. I did have to cancel it yesterday. I'll talk more about that tonight because I want to keep this video as short as possible. We're going to look at 2 segments from the affidavit of Sirah to bring in the importance of what I'm talking about here and try and put to rest this rebuttal of this advanced timing report and this 7-day. It's almost like The Ring, isn't it? 7 days. So let's look at this. So what do we know what happened in that 7 days? It's this, look. So during this investigation, law enforcement obtained the following AT&T timing advanced data. 2 of the victims had AT&T phones. Law enforcement obtained AT&T timing data on both of their phones. So what does that tell you? So that tells you that they were already hunting for advanced timing data within that 7-day period. And how do we know that? Because they obtained it. They obtained it, didn't they? So that goes to show that they were on the ball, they were out there, they were grabbing it within that 7-day window. So law enforcement developed an early investigative lead in this case. That person had an AT&T phone at the time of the crime. Law enforcement obtained his AT&T timing advanced data. So what does that tell you? That tells you that they stretched beyond the victims themselves. So at this point, it wasn't just about pulling data on the people that they specifically knew. They were pulling it beyond the people that were in the house. C. Law enforcement also requested a tower dump consisting of AT&T timing advanced data. This request involved AT&T providing all of the connections between 2 specific cell sites in Moscow during a 2-hour period. The data produced was AT&T timing advanced data. In all, there were over 3,800 AT&T mobile phones identified in the timing advanced tower dump data. So what does that tell you? That tells you that they went beyond the beyond. They were actually asking for an absolute dump of all of the phones that were on the network that they could grab data for in this 2-hour period. So you can imagine the 2-hour period was likely the hour before the crime and likely the hour in the aftermath. So you've got the crime smack bang in the middle, I would imagine. I'm just guessing, but a 2-hour window is definitely a period of time before and a period of time after, bearing in mind that the crime itself sort of happened around 8 minutes, so way less than 2 hours. Number two, the AT&T time advance data was obtained by the FBI using an internal source at AT&T, Mr. Boyd Jackson, who is not associated with the GLDC working group. GLDC was not used to obtain this data, and a forensic examination of the AT&T timing advance records in the state's possession show Mr. Jackson's association with the report. Why is that important? Because of the state's rebuttal to say that these timing advance reports didn't exist because the GLDC didn't produce them until a certain time, which was there. They were trying to be clever. Arsley Jennings was trying to be clever, but this is just proof that what she was saying was utter bollocks. Do you know what I mean? It's utter rubbish. You knew you was involved in the acquisition of this information and you got it. And not only did you get it for victims, you got it for 3,800 people, and a vast majority of them wouldn't have had anything to do with this crime. So that raises questions in itself, but they did it and they got the information. We're now going to jump over to this second one here, which is, in my review of this investigation, based on my training and experience, it is incredibly unusual that the defendant's AT&T timing advance records were not obtained by the FBI. The FBI demonstrated their ability to obtain AT&T timing advance in November 2022 by obtaining AT&T timing advance records on over 3,800 mobile devices, none of them being the defendants. When it comes to location data from AT&T, timing advance data can be some of the most accurate data available. Additionally, it contains connections to the network other than the typical voice, text, or data connections. So what that's basically telling you is there's a lot of information in here. The ability to really screw down and nail the lid, if you like, on where a phone actually is and likely what direction it's traveling, and pinpoint location far better than just a standard mobile ping as such. So it's absolutely helpful, and sometimes I guess detrimental to obtaining a win for the prosecution, which Cy Ray has been involved in more than once. Anytime a defendant's locations are in question, a timing advance report would be asked for as standard operating procedure. Moscow Police Department, by way of the FBI and with the knowledge of prosecutors, Arsley Jennings, demonstrated their awareness of this standard procedure when they obtained AT&T time advance data on over 3,800 mobile devices. So again, we don't need to go too much into that. We'll go through the rest of it tonight. You can join me. But the purpose of this is just to, again, reiterate that yes, the 7 days comes into effect if you are literally looking for one person and you need to know who that person is in order to do a search, but that is not what happened here. Again, as aforementioned, they did a complete purge, if you like, of the system, a dragnet of the system where they pulled everyone. And what Sahara is saying is very unusual that you happen to do this dragnet, you've done it over this period of time, and yet you find nothing. You find absolutely nothing on Bryan Kohberger. Now, bearing in mind that this investigation is about trying to place Bryan Kohberger at the scene of this crime, and I know what people are going to turn around and say. They're going to turn around and say now that, well, his phone was literally off the system, off it. Or was it off or wasn't it off? And when was it switched off? How long was it switched off for? If they've done it over this 2-hour period, is there no record of Bryan Kohberger being on the system whatsoever? If his phone was switched off and wasn't on the system, then why did Bryan Kohberger even leave the house with his phone if it was literally turned off? Are we saying that he turned it off and then decided to turn it back on, or are the prosecution hiding the data? And why do we ask that? And why do you have to question that? Because they claim that there is absolutely no data there whatsoever. Despite pulling all of this data from this many phones all over the place, they fail to find anything on Bryan Kohberger, and yet they want to try and tell you that they can plot a route that he took between his location in Washington and where this crime happened in Moscow, Idaho. So I asked the question, so what are you basing that on? What the minimal information you have on camera, which, yes, we've got information around the location itself, but even that is sporadic because a lot of that is being filled in by headlights and movements of headlights, not actual visual representation in the way of car. And what they're trying to do with that as well, which I've alluded to in the past, is that they're trying to say that these headlights are where this car is making U-turns and going up a road and down a road, when in reality you can't prove that. It could literally be that there is more than one car in this area and you are simply seeing a car going up a road and another car coming back down a road. They have to prove not only that Bryan Kohberger came to this area, but he entered this property and done this crime. And there is a lot of information that is missing here, and we'll talk about that in video 2 in a bit. But with respect of this, again, I can't stress enough, they do a huge dragnet, pull the information on 3,800 phones, and yet Bryan Kohberger is nowhere to be seen. And off the back end of that, the prosecution wants you to believe that timing data reports don't exist. So it isn't that they even came out the gate and said, yeah, we pulled all the data and Bryan Kohbergers wasn't in it, which wouldn't have been so strange, would it? They literally said that this information didn't exist, and that is indicative of trying to hide the fact that this information does indeed exist. And if that's the case, then why would you want to hide it? Let me know down below. Make it make sense. Love you all, and I'll catch you all in video 2 later today. Mwah.